Back in 2013, Sony first-party studio Media Molecule was on top of the world. Their premier title had blossomed into a massive IP, with its main character Sackboy becoming a pseudo-mascot for the PlayStation brand. And as the team prepared for the PlayStation 4 generation, they had another big new idea. A big new idea they hoped would elevate their signature user-created content to the next level. But over the coming decade, this dream would soon turn to a nightmare, leaving the once revered developer as a shell of their former selves, stuck facing an uncertain future. In 2008, a small team in England would collaborate with Sony to create their first game, LittleBigPlanet. It was a 2D platformer that came alongside a unique feature of level creation. What made LBP especially exciting was the ability to share these levels online and play those that had been made by others. Its level creation tools were intricate, allowing for near endless possibilities, but were also easy enough for the mass market to understand. I think what I personally found so endearing about LBP is the era it was released in. 2D platformers weren't super common anymore, with everyone having moved to the third dimension, and platformers in general were becoming rarer to see, at least on PlayStation consoles. In a time when so much of the industry was moving towards realism, LittleBigPlanet stood tall as a goofy game centered around creativity and fun. It felt like a celebration of game development, allowing anyone to step into the shoes of a game creator, at least for a little while. As someone who was a child at the time, these themes of LittleBigPlanet spoke to me in a deep way, something I bet a lot of young gamers back then can relate to. I believe having a game focused on creation like this during such formative years of my life helped solidify my deep love and appreciation for this medium, and for that I will always be grateful. It was a truly wonderful game, met with unanimous praise upon its release. Following this massive success, LittleBigPlanet quickly became one of PlayStation's biggest IPs of the era, receiving a sequel, portable versions, and even a kart racer over the next 4 years. With all of these accomplishments, and PlayStation's obvious aspirations of making Sackboy their next PlayStation icon, it would have been pretty easy to keep down this path. But Media Molecule's trademark creativity wouldn't allow them to just make LittleBigPlanet forever. And so, it was announced that they would be stepping away from the franchise, while the team began to craft their next innovation. One such project was Tearaway, a delightful little platformer originally released on PlayStation Vita and later ported to PS4. Tearaway moved away from user-created content and was more of a streamlined experience, but its inventive use of the Vita's features kept that Media Molecule creativity. From the very beginning though, Tearaway was marketed as a smaller game, something that was being done by a select group of developers within Media Molecule. A majority of the team was working on something different, and this main project would be much bigger, with the focus back on creation. Our first early look at this new game came all the way back at the PlayStation 4 reveal event in February 2013. Internally, Media Molecule had been referring to PlayStation 4 as the creative console, a place where you can go to experience other people's dreams or to make your own. In order to achieve this, the team first needed to solve a long-standing problem with digital creation, the complexity of 3D. Eventually, they found with the added power of PS4, the controller could be used to model sculptures in real time. It was as if you were drawing with pencil on paper, allowing inspiration to strike at any time. The team noticed they were able to create hundreds of these sculptures as fast as they could think of them, and began imagining what millions of PlayStation users could do with this same tool. And what if the creativity of all those people could be combined together, allowing their creations to be used across everyone's user-made levels, sets, and stories? This complex vision would be the primary goal for their next title. To end this teaser, we saw our first clip of in-game footage, featuring a band playing music with all of the characters, instruments, and sounds created within the game. This first showing was a lot of information without a ton of concrete details, and it admittedly left us with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: Media Molecule's next game would be aiming to revolutionize creation and allow for dreams to become reality. Whatever form that would take was yet to be seen, but coming off the heels of LittleBigPlanet, fans trusted them and could not wait to see what they were cooking up. But for the next 2 years, we didn't hear much. Almost every other first-party game shown at the PS4 reveal event was an early generation game. Killzone Shadowfall, Knack, Infamous Second Son, and Drive Club were all released within the first year of the console's launch, but Media Molecule's mysterious game was nowhere to be found. It wasn't until E3 2015 that this project would get a more official reveal. Confirmed to be named Dreams, the game looked stunning, sporting a watercolor paint aesthetic that could be created in real time and instantly brought to life at the press of a button. Their trailer showed tons of different examples of what was possible within Dreams, and while it all looked very impressive from a technical level, there was a looming question left unanswered. How do you play it? For now, it remained a mystery, perhaps even to Media Molecule themselves. During an appearance at Paris Games Week 2015, studio co-founder Mark Healy told IGN they didn't even know exactly what Dreams was yet, as it was going to be decided by the community and its creatives. Throughout the various press events, it seemed that almost anything you could imagine truly would be possible, and while that was incredible, I think it also made the game really hard to market and led to the long wait for release. How do you deem a game like this complete and ready for launch when basically anything the human mind can think of needs to be possible? And how do you effectively sell it to customers when the entire selling point is that it's undefined? These were the questions Media Molecule would need to figure out as the development years continued stacking up. A beta for Dreams was supposed to come in 2016, but that got pushed back until 2017. Then the full release date was set for 2018, with a beta coming sometime before. In the end, it wasn't until December 2018 that the Dreams beta finally became playable to a select group of users. The first true public playtest would come in 2019, with Dreams going down a path that was entirely new for PlayStation: early access. Early access games had taken PC storefronts like Steam by storm throughout the 2010s. It was a terrific program that allowed developers to garner feedback from their players before officially releasing the game. Unfortunately, this feature was also frequently taken advantage of, with games staying in early access for years and seemingly never being finished after getting the paycheck. Perhaps because of this, Sony was hesitant to allow a similar SKU onto the PlayStation Store. But as we got deeper into the PS4 generation, they had lightened up on this stance, especially once Fortnite became the biggest game in the world as an early access release. And with Dreams, PlayStation would now be taking the next step and release an early access game of their own. It was announced that Dreams would be launched in April 2019 in what they were calling Creator Early Access. The developers were pretty transparent that if you were only looking to play Dreams, this probably wasn't for you. The early access period was primarily aimed towards those who wanted to create. And although I'm going to criticize the decision making behind Dreams quite a bit as we continue, I must say that this was a fantastic idea for a few reasons. It would of course have all the benefits of any early access game, like getting community feedback and refining features before launch. But I think for a game like Dreams specifically, this style of release was vital. We mentioned how Dreams had been a bit of a tough sell simply because it's difficult to market, but with an early access period, the game can hopefully sell itself. People can start posting online about what they're making and playing, instead of Media Molecule having to try and find some snappy way to market it in a press conference. But the best part about the early access release was that all creations would carry over to the final game, meaning for someone like me who preferred to play instead of create, there would be a huge assortment of Dreams to choose from on day one. And with a major focus on sharing assets amongst others, there would also be a larger pool available for creators when they picked up the final version. It was almost as if the community themselves were finishing the game and getting it ready for release, which for literally any other video game ever made would be a massive insult, but for Dreams it was actually a perfect encapsulation of its central ideas and themes. First impressions of the early access release were very positive, with players impressed by how polished the creative tools already were. Over the next few months, Media Molecule's crazy vision for a game creation tool where anything was possible would finally start to take shape. Before you knew it, Dreams was full of platformers, RPGs, pinball, choose-your-own-adventure games, and so much more. Dreams was already delivering on its promise, but perhaps even more enticing were the possibilities for the future. Everyone knew this would be the most basic version of Dreams we would ever have. Media Molecule would add more features, more community-made shareable assets would become available, and most importantly, the creators would learn how to push these tools to the limit. There was every reason to expect big things from the upcoming final version of Dreams, but despite all of this excitement, there was one small cause for worry. When the early access version was announced, Media Molecule said it would have limited availability. Once they reached that limit, the early access version would be delisted and no one else could buy in. However, that limit was never reached. All the way until its final release, the early access version remained available. To be fair, Media Molecule did say they were going to let in a pretty sizable number of people and never disclosed what the exact number would be, but considering they felt the need to put that statement out at all, it makes me think the number was something they expected could realistically be hit. The fact that it never happened made me worry if there was enough interest in Dreams. Push Square reported in June 2019 that they estimated around 100,000 players had logged into Dreams after 2 months of early access. Your reaction to this number is going to depend on how generous you're feeling today. On the one hand, this was just an early access release and was specifically marketed towards creators, but at the same time, this was a PlayStation first-party game. 100,000 players after 2 months for a game like that is nothing, especially since this was being sold for just $30. If I was at Sony or Media Molecule, I would have liked these numbers to be a bit higher, but regardless, Dreams was an exceptional creation tool that had landed for the audience it needed to. We would now have to wait and see if the final release could expand that audience further. After 10 months of early access, Dreams was officially released on February 14th, 2020. Almost 7 years exactly since its teaser at the PlayStation 4 reveal event, Media Molecule's long-awaited next game was finally here. And once again, impressions were pretty good. It was incredible what Media Molecule had achieved at a technical level. However, there were some concerns about the gameplay. While the Dreams looked gorgeous and were impressive as in-game creations, they weren't always particularly fun to play. A lot of them were really cool for like 5 minutes, but there wasn't a ton of substance there. This is no fault of the creators themselves or the tools that were available. It's the side effect of having to create everything from scratch. With games like Mario Maker or LittleBigPlanet, it's a bit easier to create a level that's fun to play because at the end of the day, no matter what you're making, it's being built on a 2D platformer. But Dreams was so open-ended that a lot of the games ended up feeling like a school project. This was quite charming in a lot of ways, but it wasn't always the most entertaining unless you were already really interested in junior game design. Many reviewers did note they expected creations to get better and more fleshed out as time went on and were looking forward to the future. But in order for there to be a future, people would need to be playing now. And Dreams didn't exactly set the world on fire in the same way LittleBigPlanet did. It's never been reported exactly how many copies were sold, but one estimate had the game at around 2 million copies. The player count then jumped to around 3 million once the game was added to PlayStation Plus. Again, not terrible numbers, but not enough for a PlayStation first-party game, especially one that took so long to make. Dreams is home to an incredibly passionate and talented community. As time went on, creations did become more and more well-made. Even to this day, awesome stuff is being posted all the time. But we also can't kid ourselves. When it comes to commercial success, Dreams ultimately fell flat. So it raises the question, why didn't it work? Dreams was an extremely logical next step for Media Molecule. Gamers loved LittleBigPlanet for its creativity and seemingly endless possibilities, so it's understandable to try and make something that was truly endless next. But oftentimes, I think feeling limitless is potentially better than actually being limitless. LBP worked on a grand scale because it was accessible for anyone and then could be mastered by those who wanted to put in the time. Additionally, LBP could be marketed very easily. It was just like, hey look, it's a 2D platformer where you can make levels. You get it. However, with Dreams, the marketing always had to be about how the game could be anything. But in doing so, the game kind of seemed like it was nothing. Its complexity was its greatest strength, but also what held it back from having any chance of reaching their desired heights. With all of that said though, I still think there were some major mistakes made along the way that could have put Dreams into a better position. First and foremost were the key missing features that either never got implemented or took way too long to arrive. It felt like everything Media Molecule tried to do with this game took longer than expected. For example, PlayStation VR owners were very excited for Dreams, but the VR mode wasn't ready for launch and ended up coming a few months late. Having that VR mode on day one could have been a major boost that they completely missed out on. This VR mode was added fairly quickly, but you can't say the same about another highly requested feature, online multiplayer. Frankly, shipping this game without it is a mind-boggling decision in the first place. I don't think I can stress enough how harmful this was for Dreams. And if you don't believe me, you can ask Mark Healy himself, who told MinMax that this missing feature was his personal biggest regret from the project. Think for a moment about some of the biggest games that dominate social media. 3 that come to mind for me are Fortnite, Minecraft, and Roblox. All of these games have an element of user-created content and online multiplayer. If you want to go back even further, we can talk about something like Gary's Mod as well. The fun of finding a crazy game mode or map to play with your friends was a huge part of the appeal, and it was integral to the content you would see posted online. Now, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea and think I'm arguing for Roblox over Dreams, but when we're talking about the virality of a game, they definitely had them beat there. Another element of Roblox and Fortnite that has been huge for its user-created content is the ability to get paid for your work. Both games have systems in place where creators earn for players engaging with their stuff. With Dreams, there was always a vision that one day creators could get paid in a similar way. In an interview with Colin Moriarty on Sacred Symbols Plus, former president of SIE Worldwide Studio Shuhei Yoshida reflected on Dreams. As he recalls, there was a plan to hire small indie teams to create games within Dreams, and ideally even allow games made in Dreams to be sold as bespoke software on the PlayStation Store. What better incentive to buy into Dreams than the understanding that your creation could one day sit amongst industry titans on PSN. Unfortunately, this vision never came together. The closest they ever got was updating the terms of service in 2023, which allowed commercial use for music, animations, films, and art made within Dreams. But this still required you to share those creations elsewhere. It's not the same as getting paid directly through the game or platform. What this meant was that anything created in Dreams was pretty much just stuck there forever. And this is where I want to get back into the discussion of the complexity of Dreams. It's a bit pessimistic to act like creations in Dreams don't hold value if you can't make money off it. This is a game at the end of the day. The main goal should of course be having fun. And while that's true, the tools in Dreams were so advanced that it was essentially a game engine. So almost right away, there was a narrative that learning to create in Dreams was kind of a waste of time. If you're going to learn an advanced creation tool, you would simply be better off learning Game Maker, Unity, or Blender. Those are tools that can be monetized or skills that could be applied to a job, as opposed to learning Dreams for nothing more than fun and digital in-game likes. As the years went on, this idea of being stuck in Dreams became more and more prevalent because it was never ported anywhere else. As the PS5 generation got underway, and as Sony began putting their first-party games on PC, Dreams seemed like an obvious candidate to receive new platform releases. A PS5 version would keep the game feeling modern and fresh, while putting it on PC could allow a whole new audience to get in. And there were plans for both of these versions to be released, but they never were. Over the next few years, the Dreams community held out hope for all of these things. They held out hope that Media Molecule could figure out monetization. They held out hope that new platform versions were coming soon. And they held out hope that their small community who adored this game could one day grow into something huge. But unfortunately, none of those days ever came. On April 11th, 2023, Media Molecule announced that support for Dreams would be ending in September of that same year. Servers would remain up, but no new updates or content would be added as the team transitioned to their next project. And so just like that, A decade after their initial teaser at the PlayStation 4 reveal event, Dreams was dead just 3 years after its official release. In the same Sacred Symbols Plus interview we referenced earlier, Yoshida says, and I quote, "The studio was not able to execute their vision, even though that vision came from the studio." And I think this statement right here sums it up perfectly. Media Molecule had grand visions for Dreams, many of which were actually quite ahead of their time. But while Media Molecule spent years with their head in the sky, it doesn't seem they ever stopped to ask the question, how? How were they going to pull all of this off? How were they going to market the game? How were they going to incentivize creators to create and players to play? And most importantly, how would they get it all to come together into one cohesive package? In the end, it doesn't seem they ever answered any of these questions. They put so much time and effort into creating what is possibly the most impressive commercial game creation tool we've ever seen, but then just sent it out to die with no real plan in place. In an alternate world where they are able to figure out monetization and port Dreams to other platforms, this legitimately could have become one of PlayStation's biggest games. Maybe kids today would be playing beautiful creations in Dreams instead of whatever slop is going on over at Roblox. But sadly, we are in this world where Dreams came and went in the blink of an eye, barely remembered by even PlayStation's most dedicated fans. It's a depressing fate for one of the most innovative AAA video games we've ever seen. In the years since Dreams support ended, Media Molecule has undergone some massive changes. All of their founding members are no longer with the studio, and they have experienced multiple rounds of layoffs that saw a sizable percentage of the team let go. The New Look studio is currently developing a new IP, with job listings indicating that they are targeting a late 2026 or 2027 release. As of right now, we don't know much about this project, but the expectation is that it will be similar to Tearaway, in the sense that it is more of a traditional game as opposed to a creation tool. I ultimately think that's the best route they can take. I don't really see how you could even top Dreams in that regard, and going for a smaller project will hopefully see them releasing a game sooner rather than later. Whether this new game can recapture the iconic Media Molecule charm after so many who define the team are no longer there remains to be seen. But in an industry where so few make games like this, I will always be rooting for them, and I'll always be dreaming of what could have been.